Hello everybody, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. We have some fun pro-revenge stories to read, so let me not waste any more time and get right into it. Our first story is by GueroBear. Aggressively speed through a residential neighborhood? Now your car is wrecked and it's your fault, dumb Bubba freaker. So this was quite a few years ago. One day my kids were skating in a quarter pipe when this truck comes around the corner with a Bubba driving, and he sees my daughter come off the quarter pipe, and instead of slowing down, he floors it and rips past my house, still accelerating while yelling something about keep out of the road, freakers. I yelled also, slow down. The following weekend, I'm out mowing my lawn and I see this guy coming, so I walk out to the edge and try to wave him down to talk, and Bubba floors it again, laughing like a maniac as he goes flying by with his engine redlining. This guy is a nut. So I go to the hardware store and picked up 3 of those 3-foot orange safety cones, and I put a sign on each one of them, slow down, residential neighborhood, kids at play. A few days later, I come outside and find the cones have been run over. I already know who did it. I'm pretty pissed off, like really angry. And in that anger, I came up with my most brilliant plan. I went to the hardware store and purchased 3 new cones, along with cement and steel rebar. I filled those freakers with rebar and cement and let them set in. After the cones were ready, I put them back out on the side of the street by my house with the same 3 signs as before. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I'm in my garage tinkering, and I hear that darn truck engine revving up as the Bubba goes pedal to the metal. I look up just in time to see his truck steer towards the shoulder to run over the cones. Darn, it was a beautiful sight like none I've ever seen before. He hit the first cone with his bumper and the cone fell forward and rotated the base up towards his engine block and actually lifted the front of his truck upwards as his front passenger wheel made a direct connection with the second cone and launched his truck up even higher in the air. The third cone also made a direct hit on his right tire suspension as his truck came down to a screeching halt. There were fluids running out from under his truck and his passenger tire was angled inwards at a 90-degree angle. Bubba was pissed off and started screaming about how I wrecked his truck and how I'm gonna pay. I yelled back and said, well then let's call the cops and get them out here to make a report, and you can tell them how you were racing down the road and intentionally ran over the safety cones. Or I can call you a tow truck. Which will it be? We called a tow truck. I never did see Bubba drive down my street anymore after that incident. I was worried he'd try to get revenge, but nothing ever happened and we moved out a couple years later. Edit, didn't expect this to blow up like it has. For those of you talking about the legality of what I did and getting busted or sued, let me clarify some things here. First of all, this happened a long time ago. The legal time limit has expired for anyone to do anything about it in any legal capacity. Also, I consider myself sharper than the average bear, and I didn't enact my plan without thinking it through and thinking about the consequences of my actions. I know a thing or two about how the law works. If Bubba wanted to call the cops, I'd have gone inside my home and locked the door. If the police arrived, I'd tell them through my locked security screen that I don't answer questions, and my only statement would be that I only speak through my attorney. At that point, the police would make the report and run it up the chain of command. If the state or local prosecutor wanted to conduct an investigation, I'd go with an attorney and deny any involvement. They'd have to, at that point, decide how much time do they have to try and investigate this matter, and what is the likelihood of a conviction. Since I lived in a big city, I'm sure they had a lot worse stuff happening that would be taking up their caseload. Sounds to me like the truck driver probably had a bad record already. It's easy to be big and macho and say you're gonna pay for my truck, but this guy was obviously a bit of a lunatic, and it seemed like the mere mention of police was enough to deter them. So I feel like that tells you enough. Our next story is by Gecko Mama. Job accused me of lying, so I got revenge. When I was 17 or 18 years old, I got my first retail job. I worked at a children's store that does ear piercings. I'm sure you all know which one. I started when I was 17, and shortly after turning 18, I was given a key holder position. I was thrown into the position with practically no instruction and absolutely no training. I did my best, even though I made mistakes, and I was actually doing fairly well. Time passes, I get back from a sleepover, and my mother informs me that while I was gone, my grandfather had passed away. Now, I worked just 2 hours after I got the news, so I went in still struggling not to cry my eyes out at any second. The first thing I see is the store manager standing there looking annoyed. She takes me over to a bench out in the middle of the mall and sits with me and starts telling me about all the things I'm doing wrong. All the things I hadn't been trained on, while I mostly just blankly stared at her and tried not to cry. I wasn't taking any of the information in at all, I was just too upset. Eventually she noticed and asked what was wrong, and I broke down and started sobbing and told her. I then asked if I could go home as I didn't think I could work efficiently with this news. She told me absolutely not, and she left, leaving me completely alone in the store. Now, for context, the store sold these stuffed animals called Beanie Boos. They also had giant versions that were about $40 to $50 a piece, I think. It's been years since I worked there. But anyway, some lady walked in and decided to buy 4 of those and was ready to pay when I told her about a store close by that sold them for a cheaper price. She thanked me and left, having not bought them. So there was my revenge for being rude and uncaring about his death. Then, shortly after, I found out from a friend and fellow key holder that they had not only accused me of stealing a few dollar items, which I had not done, but they also had accused me of lying about my grandfather's death to get out of trouble. So, in a fit of fury, I called up the manager from before, told her I quit, shut the store down 2 hours early, and went home. Probably lost them about $500 in total sales that day, and proud of it. I know it's not much in the grand scheme of things, they make millions, but it made me feel better. I now have a picture of my grandfather hanging where I used to hang my store keys. Absolutely my condolences to OP, I know it happened a long time ago, but still, the message of the story is there. I think it's completely understandable and it's incredibly insensitive that they thought that you were lying about a relative's death to get out of trouble for stealing a few dollar items, which, again, you didn't even do. If this was you, would you quit on the spot? Would you just go home? Would you power through or maybe do your job badly and just deal with it? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. The next story is by Afternoon Master. Customer was rude to me, so I denied him his pizza. Not the most hectic of stories, but I thought I'd share it anyways. So I'm a delivery driver at Domino's and had got a delivery that was in a street in a small suburb out of town and got to the place, but it looked dark and uninhabited. I decided to ring up the guy and ask if he could come outside, and he said yes. Waited about a minute, then 2, nothing. I then wondered if I was even at the right place and thought maybe the address on the receipt was supposed to be another street nearby that had a similar name, so I rung him up again to try and confirm this, but then he became rude and abusive towards me like, "Mate, you freaking turn right on so-and-so street. It's not hard to find, I've been waiting a freaking long time for my pizza, now hurry up." After that, I decided his place was only a minute from where I currently was, so I did the most responsible thing. I took the pizza back to the store in the main part of town. I explained what happened to my manager and he said it was fine and he'd take care of it. I then took a different delivery, customers this time were much nicer, and we never spoke of that little incident again. That initial delivery either got canceled or delayed even further. Moral of the story is, don't mess with the people who handle what you eat. I'm not gonna lie, if I was the customer, I probably would be kind of upset if it was delayed and they were at the wrong address and asking where to go. That being said, I also wouldn't be yelling at them and cursing them out on the phone. They're just a delivery driver. I think you should try and remain as respectful as possible, despite being, in my opinion, justifiably upset. Our next story is by PKOtto. Bite me once, even twice, shame on you. Try for a third time and feel my baby wrath. When my children were in daycare, about 16 years ago, my youngest was around 14 to 15 months old, so she was still in the baby room. A boy who was 18 to 20 months old had started biting other children for some reason. This boy, already large for his age, should have been transitioned over to the toddler room, 16 to 18 month to 3-year-olds. But his parents had not started potty training, and there were other areas where he was just not developmentally ready to advance. The daycare facility had a 3 strikes rule for major offenses. I received 2 incident reports on my daughter being bitten by this boy. First time, she'd been bitten on the hand and arm. Second one ruffled my feathers pretty badly because he bit her all over her back and stomach. I was ready to fight at this point and told him if it happened again, I wanted this child banned and I wanted Child Protective Services involved because I thought it was odd that this child just all of a sudden started this behavior when he'd been a perfectly happy, affectionate, sociable child. Well, I didn't have to endure my baby girl suffering pain at the hands of this boy anymore. One of the ladies who worked the baby room told me about all this. The day after the second biting incident, the boy came at my daughter for another round. She saw him coming and grabbed one of those foam kiddie couches and ran at him, plowed him over until he was underneath the couch. When she had him where she wanted him, she sat on top of him and the couch. She refused to get off, so the lady had to pick her up and take the couch off him to let him up. They wanted me to sign an incident report against her for being aggressive towards the boy. I refused, saying that she was only defending herself. They eventually agreed and tore up the report. The boy never came at my little girl again. The next week, my daughter was transitioned to the toddler room as she was developmentally advanced even though she was a bit younger than most. First off, it sucks that this kid was biting your daughter, but it's kind of funny to imagine this like war zone of babies. Little Chompers comes trotting over for round 3, and all of a sudden this daughter equipped with a foam kiddie couch starts charging at him, ready to take them down and stop them from their dastardly actions. Our next story is by YellowJacket81, a hero of the working man. I used to work for a union shipping company. I was the guy who sorted the packages into which delivery truck they got loaded on. It was a decent gig for an 18-year-old, but it's still basically grunt work. Managers weren't union, obviously, so they were the devil. There was this one manager, Greg, who all the union boys hated because he'd constantly short us time on our breaks and complained that we didn't work fast or efficiently enough. It got so bad that we started timing everything to ensure that we were in compliance. No matter how often we could prove we were in compliance with timings, Greg just wouldn't stop making a nuisance of himself. Well, I was just a young kid grunt on the preload, but I soon realized I had more power than anybody knew. See, several months earlier, the union reached out for volunteers for a store union safety officer. Nobody wanted this role because it's basically a shoot-load of extra work with very little extra pay. However, I thought it sounded cool, naive at 18, so I took the role. And did nothing with it because I'm lazy and who freaking cares? Did nothing with it until Greg started being a little witch all the time. Turns out that a lot of the things Greg wanted to do, whether timing related or just any old thing, would conflict with the safety regulations put in place to protect the union workers. And as the union safety officer, the responsibility to write up those violations fell to me. Ladies and gents, you best believe I studied every obscure safety guideline the company or union had and targeted Greg specifically to comply with them. Want to climb on the moving belt to get that stuck box? Sorry, Greg, that requires a full electrical shutdown for safety. Gonna have to file a complaint. Greg, why aren't you wearing your hard hat when you climb the ladder to the upper storage? Have to document that. Greg, those packages are in excess of 50 pounds. You know darn well you need to get 2 people to lift them into the truck. Union needs to know. As hard as grown man Greg flexed, my 18-year-old punk kid butt flexed back harder. After doing virtually nothing safety related for several months, I filed over 20 safety violations over the course of 14 days, most of them on Greg, and where Greg could only yell and give verbal reprimands for the things he thinks we were cheating on, literally every safety violation I filed comes back to the head office for review per the terms of our union contract. Greg moved on and the beloved Sheila took his place. I can't honestly say whether I was directly responsible, but I like to tell myself I had something to do with it. and the Union boys bought my underage butt beer for some time to follow. You might have just been a young kid grunt on the preload, but you got equipped with the power to take down a manager that everybody at that place hated. Job-wise, you might have been on the lowest totem pole, but in every average working man's eyes that was employed there, you were at the top of that list, for sure. And our final story of the day is written by chunkydunkerskin. This is an oldie but goodie. Family stuff ahead, featuring my sister and her BFF. I was about 12 or 13 and was babysitting my sister and her friend. They were playing house and they found some empty beer cans my parents' busts finished before going out. They asked if they could play with them. I cleaned them out and let them have them. About 2 days later, my dad bursts into my room screaming at me for giving a 6-year-old beer. Mind you, I was still asleep when he burst in, so I was completely confused. Later, he showed me the empty cans in my sister's room and asked why I let them drink. I tried to explain the situation. They were empty, I rinsed them out and put water in them. He didn't believe me because my sister was so adamant about getting me grounded. Summertime. No phone, no going out, no allowance, but still had to do the chores. No pool, we had one in the yard. 2 months, mostly my whole summer, grounded. To say that I was ticked off is an understatement. So, being older and wiser, I tricked her into confession. I asked my mom to stand by the kitchen window. It was open and led to our porch. I asked my sister after a bunch of small talk, "Why did you lie to mom and dad about me giving you beer when it was water?" Her reply was, snarky face and all, "So you'd get in trouble." My mom flew out of that kitchen with the wooden spoon. This was well over 30 years ago, so this was much more commonplace than today. Sister got a spanking and grounded, and I was repaid my allowance, plus some, and was allowed a pool party that weekend that I invited all the kids in the neighborhood to, including sister's friends. She watched from her room all day. Now as adults, we laugh about it, but darn, kids can be straight up evil. That is a lot of punishment for something that you didn't do, especially when you're a kid. When you're 12 or 13 and you have to sacrifice your entire summer, and it's all because your sibling lied to try and get you in trouble, that would really mess me up. That would be potentially relationship damaging. I don't even care if it's when we were kids. So I'm glad the mom agreed to stand by while they got them to confess the truth. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know in the comments below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing and turning notifications on if you haven't. Both of those things support this channel greatly. So no matter what you did, whether it was just watching the video, liking, subscribing, or having notifications on, thank you all so much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time.